Oh, the music. Nobody wants to hear music. Welcome to Comedy Night at the Cranberry Elks. Thanks everybody for coming. First, I'd like to start off by thanking Sean Walchak and his wife Kim for the wonderful dinner. They put a ton of work into it. It was awesome. Thank you so much. And also everybody that John thanked earlier for help getting it together. So here we go. Comedy Night. Got Jimmy Krenn, DVE. So it's kind of a little bit of a story about how we got him here. John Vento, a friend of ours, does band together. He basically hooked me up with Jimmy Krenn, and I was talking to him one day, and I said, "You know Jim Krenn?" He says, "Yeah." I said, "Do you think he would do a show here?" And he says, "I don't know. I'll call him and ask him." Next thing you know, he pulls out his phone, calls Jimmy Krenn, and so Jimmy said he would do it. He said, "Just call my agent, and we'll get you over there." So I call up there, and I didn't know this, but when you book a comedian, the rate is based on the opening act. So, yeah, so I asked him, I said, well, I called his agent, I says, "What's it gonna cost to get Jimmy here?" He says, "Well, Jimmy can command up to $3,000 a show." And I said, "Well, that's a lot." I said, "But what's it based on?" He said, "It's based on the opening act." I said, "Well, why would it be based on the opening act?" And he said, "Well, the funnier the first guy is, the more we charge, because Jimmy has to be funnier than him." So I said, "Well, I'm the opening act." And they said, "Well, we don't have any footage of you. Like, we don't really know what to charge. Have you done anything in the past?" I said, "Well, I did one show last year." And they said, "Can you send us some footage?" So I sent the footage in, and about 2 hours later, they called me back and said, "Jimmy said he'll do it for $25. So, thank you, Jimmy. No, seriously, Jimmy did show up tonight, and he is doing his show at a nice discount for us, so we want to thank him for that. So everybody's having a good time? All right, let's see if we can change that. Show of hands. How many people got the COVID vaccine? Okay, that's pretty good. So I thought, I have a lot of time to fill. I thought we could go around and everybody could tell you like why you did or did not get the vaccine. No, we're not going to do that. So I know I did get the vaccine, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it or not. I was back and forth. So the one day I was delivering to the pharmacy at Giant Eagle, and there was a sign there that said, "Get the vaccine, and you could do it right now." And I said, "So I can come in there right now and get the vaccine?" They said, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay, let's do it." So they give me the vaccine, and I'm getting ready to leave, and they said, "Well, we want you to hang around here for about 20 minutes to make sure you don't have any side effects." So I said, "Okay." So I'm now wandering around Giant Eagle, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't know, are my lips always this big? So, yeah, when you have nothing to do but think about whether you're having a side effect or not, it's amazing the side effects that you can drum up in your head. So, if you guys saw my show last year, you're going to hear a couple of repeat jokes, because I get all my comedy from the friends around me, and really, since last year, you guys weren't really that funny, so I'm going to have to use some of the jokes from last year. As you guys know, many of you, I work for FedEx. And, well, first of all, a little public announcement for people. When your FedEx driver shows up, don't ask him what's in the package. He doesn't know. So, anyway, I was delivering down in Wexford one day, and I had some packages for Troy Polamalu. And Troy's house, it sits kind of back far off the street. And I had a couple packages for him, and it was raining. So when you deliver to a house that it's raining, you have to put the package in a bag. And I usually carry bags in my coat pocket. And so I get to Troy's porch, and I'm knocking on the door, and he doesn't come to the door, so I thought, okay, I gotta bag the package. So I reach into my pocket, I didn't have any bags. So now I have to walk all the way back to the truck, and I knock again thinking, well, if he can come to the door, I won't have to bag the package. Knock again, no Troy. Walk all the way back to my truck, get the bag, I go back, lean over, putting the package in the bag, the door opens. And I look up, there's Troy standing there. And I said, Troy, if it takes as long for you to get to the backfield as it takes to get to your front door, we're in trouble this year. Another good story, I was delivering to a woman's services place, and I had 2 really big boxes for them. So I get them on my dolly, I take them into the office, and the woman, I go in the front door and she says, are they for us? I said, yeah. She says, well, what are they? I said, I don't know. So she says, again, don't ask the FedEx guy what's in the package, right? She says, okay, just put them over there along the wall. And I said, okay, I put them over there and I leave. So about a half an hour later, I found another package on my truck for the same place. So I go back in, the woman's in there, and I says, hey, I found another package in my truck for you. And she said, you're never gonna guess what was in those big boxes. I says, I have no idea what. She says, they were tampons. She goes, I don't even know where to put them. And I said, well, I'm no gynecologist. So I have a couple kids, Bailyn and Brennan, wonderful kids, great for material. When they were younger, we took them down to Disney World. $5,000 in plane fare, $2,000 in hotel, $1,000 in tickets. So we get to the park, and you can buy autograph books for $50, I think. And they have all these puppets all over the park, and your kids can stand in line and get autographs from the puppets. So after 3-4 hours of this, I'm starting to get irritated because I spent $8,000 to come down here to get autographs from puppets. So I said to my wife, Chris, I'm like, this is crazy. I said, why are we doing this? I said, we should be seeing the park. And she says, oh, it's okay. It's what the kids want to do. Just let them go. And I said, well, what kills me, I says, it's not even the real Mickey Mouse. I says, it's just a guy in a costume. See, the real Mickey Mouse, there's not really a real Mickey Mouse. My daughter was a Girl Scout, and my wife used to put together what they called the father-daughter dance. And it was basically all the dads and their daughters would go and have a dance. So everything would go well until the end of the night. And it was always in the wintertime. Everything was great until the end of the night when all the kids were going home, and there would be 5 girls left, 5 winter coats, and none of them matched up. So, little public service announcement, women, if you ever send your husbands with your daughter, make sure they know what the coat looks like. Okay, so I got a little math stuff for you guys. Everybody good at math here? You can use your phones if you want, but I just have a little thing for math for you guys. Everybody pick a number from 1 to 10.
6.
To yourself. Multiply it by 9. Okay? Take the answer that you got and add the 2 digits together. Now subtract 5. Everybody got their number? All right, if A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3, take the letter that corresponds to your number. Everybody got it?
Yep.
All right, pick a country that starts with that letter. Okay? The last letter of that country, pick an animal that starts with that letter. Everybody got it?
Yeah.
There's no kangaroos in Denmark. So I used to tell jokes like that to my kids all the time, and they would fall for it too. So my daughter was about 5 years old, and she says to me, "Dad, I got one for you." I says, "All right, what is it?" She says, "Pick a number from 1 to 10. I says, "I got it." She says, "Subtract 5. I says, "Okay, got it." She says, "Multiply by 8. I says, "Okay." She says, "Subtract 1. I says, "Okay." She says, "What was your number?" And I said, 7. She says, "Yep." My daughter, God love her, she was 14 or 15 years old, and she had a boyfriend over the house for the first time, and she wanted to have a campfire. She says, "Dad, can we have a campfire?" And I said, "Sure." Now it was raining all day long, the wood was all wet, so I go out, get the wood, try to light it, gasoline, everything, fanning it. Takes me 45 minutes to get this fire going. So we're sitting around the fire finally, me, bathing, her new boyfriend. Sit down, I crack a beer open, and she says, "Bye, Dad." I said, "Thank you." So that's bathing. Let's move on to Brennan. We went on vacation a couple years ago, and all week we had a lot of fun and everything. So the very last day we're cleaning up and everything, and Brennan says to me, "Hey, did anybody see my wallet?" I said, "No, I haven't. In fact, I haven't seen it all week." So Brennan says to me, when he was going to college, he said, "I can't wait till I get out of college because I'm going to be raking in the dough." And my answer to that was, "Well, when are you going to learn how to use a rake?" That I got to see. So I'm watching a football game the other day, and there's a beer commercial on. It was for Miller Lite. And it says, "We have 1 more calorie in our beer than Michelob Ultra and a whole lot more flavor." Right? The point is, you know. So my son Brennan, he's a pretty bright kid, and I started thinking to myself, how do they know how many calories are actually in a can of beer? So I said to my wife, I said, "How do they know that?" And it was really a hypothetical question. But then I thought, Brennan's going to know the answer to this. So I text him. I'm like, "Brennan, how do they know how many calories are in a can of beer?" And he says, "Well, it's called a calorimetry test," and he knew the whole thing. He says, "Yeah, they boil it and they measure the heat before and after, and they can determine exactly how many calories are in a can." I'm like, "Brennan, I didn't really expect you to know that, but I kind of knew you would." So we get into this conversation, and he's telling me that it takes 100 calories of heat to burn 1 gram of fat or something like that. And he says, "Wait a minute, did I just solve?" Oh no, ice cubes. He says, "It takes 1 gram of heat to melt an ice cube." He says, "Did I just solve the beer belly problem?" He says, "You drink a beer and then eat an ice cube. You burn up enough calories to melt the ice cube in 1 beer." Right? So I'm like, "This is great." He says, "Well, there's a catch." I says, "Of course there is." He says, "When they measure calories at heat, it's a big capital C, and when they measure it in food, it's a small c, so it really doesn't matter." He says, it's a 1,000 factor. Then he says, "I got it. New decree. For every beer I drink, I shall eat 1,000 ice cubes." Brennan also said to me one day, "Dad, do you ever notice whenever your girlfriend says she wants to talk, it's never usually about football?" So my proudest moment of Brennan, he was really screwing up one day, and he's sitting in a chair, and Chris is yelling at him, and I can only describe it. I don't know what she was saying, and it was like this, okay? And Brennan is just sitting there, and he's taking it in, he's taking it in, he's taking it in, and after 5 minutes of her screaming at him, she ends up with, And listen, I am not kidding. And Brennan, just calm as could be, just looked at her and said, never once through that entire conversation did it ever occur to me that you might be kidding. Now we move on to the wife. Yeah, okay.
Danger, Will Robinson, danger.
I know, right? I've got to stand back here for this one. So all night long, I'll sit on the couch, watch football, watch movie, whatever I want to watch on TV. Chris is over there sleeping away. Doesn't matter how loud it is or anything. So we go into bed, and I put on I usually listen to some YouTube videos, and I have it so soft that I have to I'm like trying to watch with one eye while I'm listening with my ear so that I don't disturb her. And she's constantly saying, can you turn that down? It's keeping me up. So I outsmarted her. When we get into bed now, I just ask her to watch something. I say, hey, can you watch this? 2 seconds later, she's out. So one day, Chris comes home from Home Depot and says, hey, they have women's seminars at Home Depot. And I said, women's seminars? And he says, yeah, they're having workshops, and they're showing women how to improve things. And I thought, why would they have women go over there for that? Why not the guys? And I thought, okay, well, the guys will go over there and they'll go through the workshop and they'll say, well, that's a pretty good idea, but I'm not going to do it. The women will go over there and I was like, that's a pretty good idea. My husband's going to do that. So she goes to the first one. She comes home, I says, well, how was it? She says, that was pretty good. And I said, oh. I said, what was the topic? And she says, it was how to improve the appearance of your entryway. And I said, shouldn't you be going to Victoria's Secret for that? Oh, it takes a while for that one to sink in. Yeah, early on in our marriage, I used to get in trouble for not telling her stuff. I would, no matter what she would find out, she goes, why didn't you tell me that? And I'm like, well, I didn't really think to. So one day my sister calls me, she says, oh, by the way, Wayne got a job. My brother-in-law was laid off, and he got a job. So I'm like, oh, this is great. I'm going to tell Chris that Wayne got the job, and I'm finally going to tell her something. So I says, hey, hon, guess what? She says, what? I says, Wayne got a job. She says, what do you mean he got a job? What happened to his other one? Yeah, I was in trouble again. One day I was at work. Chris calls me and says, hey, there's a couple guys out here that want to seal the driveway. And I said, well, how much? And she says, well, I don't know. I says, well, listen. I says, I can do it myself for $25. I says, they're gonna want a bunch of money. I says, tell them $75. If they'll do it for that, it's worth it. I won't have to do it myself, but I'm willing to pay $75. And she says, no, they want $100. And I said, okay, tell them forget it. I'll do it myself. So 20 minutes later, she calls back. She said, hey, they're back. They said they'll do it for $75. I said, I knew they would. She says, well, they want $75 and 2 glasses of ice water. I said, okay, do it. Next thing I called back and I'm like, no, tell them $75 for 1 glass of ice water. I had to win the negotiation. So early on, we went to it was a marriage strengthening class. And it was just how to keep yourself out of trouble, I guess, for lack of a better word. So one of the lessons was, if your wife cooks you a dinner and you don't like it, you don't come out and say you don't like it. You just, you wait a couple days. Rather than telling her right away, right? So I said, okay, that's a good idea. So about a week later, we go home and Chris makes a dinner for me. And she said, well, how is it? And I said, I'll let you know on Thursday. Next portion of the show, fun with Pauline. Pauline is my mother-in-law. Not the smartest person in the world, and she will tell you that. And she's actually given me permission to use her as the butt of jokes because she sees the humor in herself. So when Brennan graduated from college, we went to Rupp Arena, I think it's called. It's the big basketball arena. And all the kids who were graduating were down on the floor, and all the people who were in the audience were up in the stands. So they have 35, 40 rows of kids, 3 deep. And when they start the graduation process, the first row gets up, walks across the stage, give them the diploma, they go back and they sit down. Second row gets up. This goes on for an hour and 45 minutes. Row by row, column by column. I am not kidding you, we're on the very last row. Kids stand up, and she's sitting next to me and she says, how many more kids do you think have to go through? And I just said, I have no idea. Is this on?
Jimmy's renting spree, right?
Oh, nice.
Did you tell him to say that? Actually, we
No.
got paid, Jimmy.
The pork was still good. So the fun with Pauline, one day, Pauline loves cats. She loves animals. And I like to kind of mess with her. So I said to her one day, I said, hey, Mom, I have a question for you. I said, would there ever be a situation where you would shoot a cat with a BB gun? And she says, of course not. I said, well, right. I said, nobody really would. I said, let me give you a situation. I said, you're sitting on your front porch, you have a BB gun, and there's a tree, and there's a bird's nest in a tree, and there's some birdies up there. I said, and there's a cat going up to the tree, and it's going across, and it's going to kill the birds. I says, would you shoot it? She says, oh, no. She said, I would just make some noise and scare the cat away. I said, okay, change the situation. You're sitting on the front porch with your BB gun, and there's a deaf cat climbing up a tree. So she also told me at one point, she said, if I saw 2 guys beating up on a third guy, she says, I would jump in and help that third guy. I said, well, you have to ask questions though. I said, how do you know what they're fighting about? I said, you never know. I said, that guy that they're beating up might have just killed a deaf cat with a BB hole in his side. So Pauline's husband's Walt. He told me a story one time when he was in high school. He was in gym class and he cut his hand. And he had to go to the emergency room. And he says he has a towel wrapped around his hand. He walks in. He says there's a bunch of people sitting in the room. He says he looks over and he sees a guy in the corner. And he's sitting there with a butcher knife sticking in his back. He said, I looked at this guy and I said, Coach, you got to take me somewhere else. And he says, why? He says, because that guy got a knife sticking in his back, and he's waiting. he's never getting to me. Dave Strait. Is he here tonight? Dave Strait. I'm playing golf with Dave one day, and my father-in-law made some fishing videos to put on YouTube. And he wanted some theme music to play in the background while he's talking about fishing. So I'm a guitar player, so I wrote a nice little, I call it a ballad, nice little finger picking thing. And it's really kind of nice. So I'm sitting in the cart with Dave, and we're just waiting to tee off on the next hole. And I says, hey, Dave, I want you to listen to something. And he says, okay. So I pull it out, and I'm playing it for him. And he's listening to it, and he's like almost tearing up. And he says, Bill, he says, I got to tell you. He says, when I listen to that, it just makes me want to fish. So Dave's the keyboard player in our band, the Swearing Hats. By the way, we're playing at Jurgles next Wednesday. Wednesday, 7:30. Please make your way down to see us. So, in the Swearing Hats, we have some great singers, great keyboard players. And I always complain after shows are over, all I hear from our people come to see our shows is, boy, you guys got some really good singers. So, shortly after that, we're doing a show, and I come off the stage after we were done playing, and this older lady says to me, hey, Bill. I said, yeah. Oh, and meanwhile, I'm always complaining, like, nobody ever tells us how good the guitar players are. It's always about the singers. So she calls me over and she says, hey, Bill, she says, I just want to tell you, I was watching you up there. And I said, yeah. She says, I just wanted to tell you, I really like that shirt. And this is the shirt I was wearing. That's why I wore it tonight. Another friend of ours, Mike Miko, who couldn't be here tonight, we were doing karaoke over at the Elks early on, and he doesn't really sing a whole lot of karaoke. He was very nervous about it. And he kept going back and forth. He wanted to sing either Beth by Kiss or Sweet Caroline. And I said, Mike, I said, everybody does Sweet Caroline. I said, nobody wants to hear that song again. You got to do Beth. It's a great song. Nobody ever hears it. So he says, okay. So he's nervous and everything. Again, he goes, no, I don't think, he said, I can't do that. I'm like, Mike, you got to do it. Another 10 minutes goes by. He wants to do Sweet Caroline. I'm like, fine. I'm like, Mike, just go do Beth. So he goes up there and he does Beth. And he comes back and he says, well, how was it? I said, you should have done Sweet Caroline. Don Gook is sitting right up front here. Yeah. Don and I went to high school together. We worked together.
Yes.
And if you know Don knows stuff. He just knows stuff. So this is about, 20 years ago. I'm at work with Don. He comes in and he says, Bill, you know what today is? I said, October 3rd? He goes, yeah. You know what that is? I said, no, I have no idea what. He says, this is the anniversary of when you and Chris got engaged. I said, how would you know that? He says, I don't know. I just know it. I'm like, okay. So I figure I'm going home with some good information here. So I go home and say to Chris, hey, guess what today is? She says, I don't know what. I'm like, oh, you don't know? She says, no, what? I said, this is the anniversary when we got engaged. She said, we got engaged in April. And I just said, I'm going to kill Gookus. So, Central Parking. We worked for Square Industries, got bought out by Central Parking. So, Don and I were both managers. All the managers were nervous because when you get bought out, that's who they get rid of. So, I met my new boss the one day, and he said to me, oh, by the way, I ordered you business cards, so watch for them to come in. And I said, oh, well, that's good news. I said, if you order me business cards, I guess that means you're going to keep me. He says, well, I only ordered you 10. That was a vote of confidence. I don't think I used them all. Chinese alphabet, 7,773 characters. Can you imagine how hard Chinese Wheel of Fortune is? First contestant. Is there a tic-tac-toe board with that little squiggly thing up? Yeah, there's 3 of them. So I had an old Buick Regal, I think it was, I'm not sure. I bought it for the kids, and it needed a bunch of work, and I just wasn't going to put the money into it anymore. So I wanted to sell it, but I didn't want to sell it because who likes selling a car? So I hear these commercials, we buy any car. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll go online, I'll put the information in and see what happens, right? So I type in all the information for my car, and it comes back $900. And I'm like, $900? Hell yeah, I'll take it. So I drive over to We Buy Any Car, and I meet with a guy, and he comes out and looks at the car, and he said, he says, first of all, you put in it was an SE, but it's an SL. He said, so the best we're going to be able to do is 750. And I'm still thinking, hell yeah, I'll take 750, right? So this guy goes out, he looks under the hood, drives it around, he's checking the paint, looking for damage, just goes over this car. We go back inside, gets on his computer, he's on there for 10, 15 minutes, and I'm sitting there the whole time, and he looks at me, he says, I'm not sure you're going to want what we're going to offer you. But again, I don't want to sell the car, but I'm thinking 750, maybe he's going to say 300. I says, well, what will you give me for it? And he said, $52. I'm thinking, $52. Like, not $50, just $52. So that's great. Rich Inman. Time to pick on you. Rich Inman, could you stand up, Rich? There's a better than 58. I'm a math major, so I checked out the math. There's a better than 58% chance that he coached one of your kids. Right? Rich coached everything. So I got to find my list of people that he put in pro. I lost it. All right, Corey Mazzoni played for.
I didn't coach him.
Yes, you did. Corey Mazzoni played for the Padres, I think. Don Barkley played for the Green Bay Packers. Who else? Todd Henshire played for the Cardinal organization. Yeah, so me, I coached my son Brennan. He played the piano. Okay, so I die and go to heaven. I get up to the gates. St. Peter says to me, Bill, you're not going to believe this. You made it into heaven by just this much. I says, well, that's great. I'm in, right? He says, yeah. He says, but there's a catch. He said, you're in, but you have to walk around holding hands for the rest of time with the homeliest girl in heaven. I says, well, I guess if that's my plight, then that's it. So next thing I know, I get up there and I look and I see our ER, Tommy Vasella. And he's walking around holding hands with Katy Perry. I'm thinking, what the heck, right? So I go over to St. Peter, I'm like, I don't get it. Like, Tommy wasn't that much better than me. Like, I'm walking around with a homeless girl, he's got Katy Perry. St. Peter looked at me, he said, Bill, you wouldn't believe it. He says, Katy Perry made it to heaven by just this much. Jim Jackal was the butt last year. That's what you get when you're the ER. So this is a joke my dad used to tell. It's one of my favorite jokes. I did not make this one up. But it was his favorite joke, and I think I'm going to end on it tonight. There was a wrestler in the United States, American wrestler. Best in the United States. Nobody could touch him. Won hundreds of fights in a row. Nobody could beat him. So he was kind of getting bored with it. And then his manager comes to him. He says, hey, there's a guy in Japan having the same problem. Hasn't lost a fight in years. He says, we should set up a fight between the two of you guys and see who's the best wrestler in the world. So they agree. The big day comes around for the wrestling match. And TV cameras are all there and everything. And the coach says to the American guy, he says, listen, he says, I think you're better than this guy. He says, but he has this move. It's called the Japanese pretzel hold. He says, and no one's ever gotten out of it. He says, and if he gets you in that hold, he said, you're going to be done. He says, just be very careful. So the American guy says, okay, right. So they go out there for the first round. The coach says, don't run at him. Don't run at him. Just let him come to you. So the American guy says, I got this. So he goes, he runs at the Japanese guy. Japanese guy flips him up in the air, tucks one arm under here, one arm under there, one leg under here, one leg under there, puts him on his back. Ref starts counting. 1, 2. All of a sudden, the American guy flings out. Japanese guy rolls over on his back. American guy rolls on top of him, pins him. 1, 2, 3, wins the match. So after the fight's over, he goes over to the coach. The coach says to him, I don't understand. He says, no one's ever gone out of that hole before. How did you do it? He said, Coach, he says, I was in panic. He said, I didn't know what to do. He said, I looked up in front of my eyes right here, and he says, I saw these 2 big balls hanging down. He says, and I just stretched my neck out as far as I could, and I just bit down on those balls as hard as I could. And he says, Coach, let me tell you something. You'd be surprised how strong you get when you bite yourself in the balls. All right, where are we on time here? How much time we got? What time is it? 8:23. Well, I guess that's enough time. Huh? Do we have time? Do you guys want to do a little bit of trivia?
Yeah.
Huh? All right, so I didn't think I was going to be able to run this long, so I made up some trivia questions, and they have a theme.